I have got a huge variety of interests, and I try to apply things from one skill to another. In undergrad, I took ballroom, dance, and judo during the same semester, and I applied the principles of being a leader in ballroom dance to throwing people in judo. I learned Spanish in high school, then applied some meta language learning skills to then learn Japanese in undergrad in 2 years, at least to a conversational degree. I tend to find cross-applicable takeaways in things, and then realized I've been playing the Ocarina for 13 years. What has it taught me, and what can it teach you? By the end of this video, you will understand how playing the Ocarina can teach you broader life skills. And if you make it to the end, promise me you'll subscribe. First, ride the wave of passion, but don't burn yourself out. When I bought my very first Ocarina, which was an STL 12-hole alto C, they call it tenor C, I was obsessed, and I got really good really quickly because I was practicing like 4+ hours a day for months. And while I didn't play 4 hours a day every day from then on, that level of obsession lasted from ages 13 all the way through like 18. I play a lot less often now, but I got good because of riding that wave of passion. That said, obsession, on the other hand, can snuff passion out. In an example from his book Hidden Potential, Adam Grant studied concert pianists and looked at their background and practice habits. He found that the vast majority of concert pianists, prior to making concert pianist their profession, played around an hour a day. They played out of passion, but did not burn themselves out through obsession. That passion had lasted from a very young age. On the other hand, a far lower proportion of successful concert pianists had obsessive practice habits in their youth. Obsessive meaning many hours a day. Even though the obsessive group practiced far more hours in their formative youth years of musicianship, the moderated, passionate group ended up being far more successful because they didn't burn out. In other words, if you're passionate about something, there can be too much of a good thing. For example, if you end up getting really passionate about ocarinas, set some boundary for your daily practice, unless you're like practicing for an imminent performance. 15 to 30 minutes a day of practice for 10 years will get you a lot farther than like 5 hours a day of practice for 1 year and then burning out. If you're playing 5 hours a day for a year, after 1 year, you will be better than someone who only plays 15 to 30 minutes a day, but the 15 to 30 minutes a day crowd will play for the rest of their lives. Next, the Ocarina has taught me to say yes to opportunities. I've mentioned many times that David Ramos inviting me to join Okabanda changed my life, but I don't think I've ever mentioned that I almost said no because I thought I wasn't good enough. In fact, the very first time Okabanda met in 2017, I really subconsciously thought that I had like something to prove. So I was really trying to show off like my musical knowledge and skill and whatever to everyone there. And that's because I knew that everyone there was definitely a more experienced instrumentalist than I was, even though I am an experienced musician. Thankfully, that slightly toxic behavior only lasted for that very first meeting in 2017. I mean, I was 19, of course I would be a little immature, but the imposter syndrome still stays with me. The imposter syndrome has never gone all the way away, but I'm so glad I didn't talk myself out of saying yes to Okabanda. When you have great opportunities in your life, say yes if they're offered to you, even if you don't feel qualified. If you're doubting your abilities, you should also doubt your self-doubt. A lot of photographers say that the best camera is the camera that you have on you, and I think that applies to instruments too, or anything for that matter. Sure, the very best, highest quality, nicest instrument that you have should be used when planned and will have the very best sound of any instrument you own. My Spencer sounds better than my Knight by Noble. But I'm not putting my Spencer in my backpack pocket. That costs $250. I don't want to break that. But the Knight by Noble, it's plastic. I'm not breaking it. Because they're indestructible, I always have a plastic ocarina in my backpack, whether I'm at class or traveling. And this really helps because most people don't know what an ocarina is. So when I mention it, people are like, "Oh, Andy, what's an ocarina?" I'm like, "This." And they're like, "Wow, I've never seen one of those before." And then I'm like, now you have. For example, I've taken 2 semesters of finance with the same professor in my MBA program, and the first time I explained what an ocarina was, and he's a musician, so he's very interested in these types of things. And then the second time I took a class with him, when we were doing like introductions to the class, he was like, "Andy, I already know what you're gonna say, just take it out and play something." And I was like, Thanks, Professor Faulkner. That backpack plastic ocarina is the ocarina I always have on me, so in most cases, it's the best ocarina I have. Another thing I've learned is that passion is contagious no matter what it's for. In general, nobody knows what the ocarina is outside of like the ocarina community itself, but I got into the ocarina thanks to passionate people like David Ramos, and I know that my passion for the ocarina has helped many of you on your ocarina journeys in one small way or another. People tend to respect passion and want to learn more when you're passionate about something. Even my finance professor knows what an ocarina is and is interested in learning one. Looking for a man in finance. Ocarina, 6'5", blue eyes. The ocarina has taught me that doing hobbies alone is nice, but it's really nice to have someone to do hobbies with. Because the ocarina is so obscure, it tends to be a very lonely hobby, especially in an in-person social setting. There are some phenomenal online communities, like the Global Ocarina community, which planned Ocarina Fest last year, but seeing as I don't really use Facebook, I don't really engage in these communities. And in most local areas, local players with whom you can play the ocarina don't really exist or are impossible to find. However, my fondest memories with the ocarina have always involved other people. Whether that's playing with Okabanda, ocarina friends I've made at cons, or duets with other instrumentalists. The Legend of Zelda might have made me notice the ocarina in the first place, but it was not Zelda that made me love the ocarina. The specific moment was after buying my first ocarina in 2011 at an anime convention, I went back to that same anime convention in 2012 and was just playing the ocarina in the halls, showing off my new skills. I jammed with so many other musicians, including San Jose local gaming jazz band Super Soul Bros, who you might know if you go to conventions and listen to gaming music at all. The last life lesson that the ocarina has taught me is that sometimes accepting limitations is a good thing. As instruments go, the range on a 12-hole ocarina is very limited, but the limitations the ocarina has actually force you to be more creative in how you push those boundaries. Playing dynamics on the ocarina is difficult because breath pressure is tied to your tuning. More breath pressure makes the ocarina louder, but it also makes the ocarina sharper. And vice versa. That can be a very annoying limitation, especially if you're trying to fit an ocarina into like an orchestral or symphonic setting. But working within or around these limitations ends up being part of the joy of playing the ocarina. Let's do a non-ocarina example. When Nintendo released the Game Boy, the technological limitations at the time forced Nintendo to be far more creative and efficient in designing games for that system. Limitations were even added to reduce cost to the consumer, like removing color.
No color screen?
Color, you need 8 batteries instead of 4. It's too expensive.
With strict limitations on hardware, game developers had to be far more creative in creating their games. Creative workarounds had to be made for graphics to look great and for the frame rate to be acceptable. In contrast, game developers today often bloat the heck out of their games. AAA games can take up hundreds of gigabytes. Back to the ocarina, thanks to the limitations of the ocarina, advanced techniques for extending range or playing dynamics in tune were developed. Practicing these techniques can make us better musicians on every instrument we play, not just the ocarina. It improves our dexterity when holding instruments, our ears for tuning, the precision of our airflow, things like that. Limitations are exactly what makes an instrument unique. Your brain is flexible. In life, everything you do, learn, and experience can impact other areas of your life and give you tools to improve. And if you're still on the fence about the ocarina, you should watch my deep dive about how learning any instrument dramatically improves your brain health. Otherwise, you're at the end, so subscribe like you promised. Big thank you to my patrons Bruce and Joshua, and happy tootin'.